Taking a look now at Detroit's economy, the new president and CEO of the Detroit Economic Growth Corporation sat down with us at the recent Detroit Policy Conference. Roderick Miller says the key to growing jobs and investment in Detroit centers on how the city tells its story. Roderick, thanks so much for joining us on MiWeek.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so the DEGC, investment and jobs. What kind of challenges have you faced in these first few months, half a year on the job?
Well, one of the things that's really critical to being able to drive new investment to the city is having a clear story. Unfortunately, there are a lot of people trying to control the story of Detroit, or I don't even know if they're trying to control it, but there are a lot of stories out there. We've got to have a cohesive message about our value proposition. So that's really been where a lot of effort has been focused on how do we tell our story most effectively so that it resonates with potential investors and that the value proposition is clear.
So what are some of the stories that you're encountering from people saying, oh, well, that's really what's happening in Detroit? What have you had to try to correct, I guess?
Well, one of the things is that the market recovery is not a real market recovery because it's just, a couple of people that have a lot of money and that there's not opportunities happening throughout the city. And that's just quite frankly not true. We've got a lot of investors all over the city and a lot of small businesses that are launching. There are things happening in the city. So, they're kind of the big names that everyone tends to focus on, but those are that's indicative of a bigger market reality, but there are things happening throughout the city, and I think that's one of the things that we've not done a good job at showing and highlighting a lot of these small and medium-sized businesses that have been in the city for a very long time that are making decisions to expand right now because they've got renewed confidence in the market.
When you guys are going around trying to sell Detroit to people, though, what are the legitimate hurdles that you think still stand in the way? What are the things that you have to talk people out of before they will come here?
Well, still there are big questions about the level of quality in terms of our ability to deliver from a government perspective. Is there transparency? Are there issues with corruption? Are there, and those
people are still asking those questions.
They're still asking those
What's
questions.
your answer?
The answer is that we've come a very long way and that there have been numerous things that the mayor has done in order to increase transparency in the city, and the results in terms of quality of city services is apparent. You're talking about moving from a few hundred street lights to thousands of street lights in just a year. So those kinds of things show that the government is moving much more effectively, much more efficiently than they have. But those are real questions, and those are fair questions.
Do people ask you about the tax burden? We hear people talk about that it's harder for businesses here, and empirically that's true. But is that something that ever comes up?
It does come up, but I will tell you there are 10 other hurdles that come up before the tax burden.
Before that?
Yeah.
So, a lot of projects on the drawing board in Detroit. You've got the Joe Louis Arena project, Ford Auditorium, the big arena project. A lot of capacity is going to come into the system that you're going to have to fill. Is there the demand out there to fill all that space as it comes online in the next year or two or three?
Absolutely. For years, the city has really been underserved in terms of because it didn't have the capacity, and there were a lot of challenges that really kind of limited the ability of the market to perform. But the market is there, and I think Detroit has an exciting enough story and an exciting enough revitalization that companies will come and that events and conventions will come.
But Rod, we know that residential space is going and filling up. Office space looks pretty good, but there still seems to be a lot of retail space capacity that's going unfilled, particularly up and down Woodward and in the core of downtown. When are we going to start seeing retail?
Well, there's a couple of things that drives retail. One is that we always say retail follows rooftops. So you've got to have the population base, and there's still question about what's the capacity, what are the purchasing habits of the population that's moving in and taking up these kind of core corridors in downtown as well as up in Midtown. What are the spending habits? What are the things that this population really wants? That's still not clear to the marketplace, and that's part of what we have to do is define that story. The other thing that really drives national retailers is turnkey space. And we still have, even though we have spaces, they're not really turnkey yet.
What is the balance that you have between trying to attract a large national retailer and then also trying to cultivate a lot of these smaller businesses that are trying to, put a stake in downtown and be along that corridor that's starting to revitalize?
And so the reality is you need both. You need local small businesses that provide that local flavor and culture, if you will, and you also need kind of national retailers to kind of ground the market because if someone's coming in from out of town, they may not know the local shop, but they'll know, you know, the big national brand. And so that national brand really provides a level of stability that allows the local companies to be much more scalable. So we've got to figure out what's the right mix of that. Motor City Match is a great, you know, program that's just being launched. That's
the mayor talked about at a State of the City address.
That's right, and I mean it's going to partner property owners with businesses, and I think that's going to be one of those things that can be catalytic. But one of the things is as we do that, and that's really a local small business program, is to figure out how do we leverage even the activity happening there to bring in more national retailers.
You came from New Orleans and relocated here to Detroit for this job. What things have you, do you think, taken from your experience in New Orleans that you can put into play here in Detroit?
There are a lot of things. So one of the most important things is in terms of this economic progress and economic strategy, that it really has to be something that's bought into by all the layers of kind of society, whether it's the grassroots, the civic leaders, the business leaders, the political leaders. You need everybody really rolling in the same direction. If you don't do that, we would encounter a lot of friction. So I think one of the key things is making sure that this process of building our economy is one that's inclusive and allows opportunities for everyone. That's one. The other thing that I think is really, really important, the basics, is that the city has to be able to perform. When somebody goes for a permit and they go for a license, they need to know that this is the process and this is how long it takes. There needs to be clarity around our ability to deliver some of those basic services that companies look for in order to be able to make investments.
You're also talking about the jobs picture, and there's a clear link between development and jobs, but are there other things that DEGC is also interested in doing that you think will help improve employment for Detroit?
You know, so it's very interesting that you say that. You know, DEGC has been known for a very long time as a group that's very focused on the real estate development aspect. One of the things that we're really ramping up our capacity is our corporate attraction space. I think it's a huge faux pas not to have somebody on the road selling Detroit 200 days a year in competitor markets, Chicago, Pittsburgh, Indianapolis, Minneapolis. And so one of the things is that we're ramping up.
Saying to someone, move your company here.
Move your company here. And this is the competitive advantage of our market vis-a-vis your market.
Rodney, you got a lot of interest in downtown Detroit. A lot of folks wanting to come in, as you said, invest their money. What are you doing to make sure that the people who've been here a long time and struggled through the hard times here aren't getting sort of run over in this process and pushed out?
You know, it's one of those interesting things. There's been this whole conversation about community benefits agreements and how do you ensure community benefits. There's some core principles in terms of how deals should be structured that really can ensure that. Number one, there needs to always be some sort of employment, you know, threshold, and ideally there should be a local number in there. There should be clawback agreements and development agreements that say that if you don't perform, that there is the ability to claw back some portion of an incentive or anything that's. So those sorts of things really can kind of provide for that. And then last but not least, strong workforce development programs so that local people actually have the capacity to move into those jobs.
Now, what about the existing business people who've been occupying these spaces that weren't that hot and so they weren't that expensive, and now they're much more in demand? What are you doing to protect them or to help them find other spaces?
Well, one of the things that's been very interesting is the New Economies Initiative partnered with the DGC, and we actually did a program where we gave out $10,000 grants and several $100,000 grants to businesses that been up and that have been holding that up. And I think more things like that are going to be really, really critical. And then also through our D2D program, we connected existing Detroit businesses to companies that would buy those services. And last year, we grew the spend from $550 million between Detroit businesses doing business to $810. So those kinds of things allow these companies to expand their marketplace locally.
All right, Roderick Miller, thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.